There's a category of professional task most people avoid until they can't anymore. Not because they don't know what needs to be said, not because they don't have the authority to say it, but because the conversation feels unpredictable. They don't know how the other person will react. They're not sure how to handle it if it goes sideways. And so they defer. They rehearse it in their head without ever actually preparing, and they walk in underprepared and hoping for the best. Difficult conversations, performance issues, delivering bad news, pushing back on a decision, managing someone out, handling a client who's gone off the rails. This episode is about what changes when you prepare properly and what proper preparation actually looks like with Claude AI. Here's why difficult conversations feel so hard and why most of the preparation people do doesn't actually help. The difficulty isn't usually the core message. Most people know what they need to say. The difficulty is everything around it. How to open without triggering defensiveness. How to handle the reaction you're anticipating. How to stay on track if the conversation goes somewhere unexpected. How to land on a clear outcome rather than an unresolved tension. Most preparation for difficult conversations focuses on the message, rehearsing what you're going to say, getting the wording right. That preparation helps, a little, but it doesn't address the harder problem. What happens when the other person doesn't respond the way you scripted? The preparation that actually changes outcomes addresses that harder problem. It works through the reactions, the resistance, the worst case moments, before the conversation happens. Claude AI does exactly that, when briefed correctly. Here's the brief template that turns difficult conversation preparation from vague rehearsal into genuine readiness. I have a difficult conversation coming up. Here's the situation. Describe what's happening and why the conversation is needed. The person I'm speaking with, describe them. Their role, how they tend to respond to challenge or criticism, what they care about, what I know about where they're likely to be emotionally on this. My objective. What I need to achieve, not just what I need to say, but what outcome I need to leave with. The message I need to deliver. State it clearly in 1 or 2 sentences. The tricky part. This is the most important element, the specific thing I'm worried about, the reaction I'm anticipating, the moment in the conversation where I'm not sure what to do, the question I don't know how to answer. Help me with how to open the conversation, the 2 or 3 things I need to land, how to handle the tricky part, and how to close on a clear outcome. That brief, filled in honestly, produces a preparation framework that covers the conversation wherever it goes. Not just the easy version, the hard version too. Part 1. 4 difficult conversation types and what the preparation looks like for each. Difficult conversation type 1. Addressing a performance issue with someone on your team. This is the conversation most managers dread most, not because the issue isn't clear, but because the dynamic is loaded. You're the manager, they're going to feel judged. If you're too direct, it damages the relationship. If you're not direct enough, nothing changes. The tricky part element is doing the most work here. For a performance conversation, the tricky parts are usually, what if they get emotional? What if they push back and say the issue isn't theirs? What if they tell me something I didn't know that changes the picture? When you name those 3 things in the brief, what comes back is a preparation that includes how to open without triggering defensiveness, how to name the performance gaps specifically without it feeling like an attack, how to handle each of those 3 reactions if they happen, and how to close on a clear agreement about what changes. You're not just prepared for the version of this conversation that goes well, you're prepared for the version where they cry, where they push back, where they tell you something you didn't expect. Difficult conversation type 2. Delivering bad news. A project that's going to miss its deadline. A budget that's been cut. A role that's being made redundant. These conversations share a structure. You're telling someone something they don't want to hear, and the way you do it has lasting relationship consequences, regardless of the news itself. The brief for bad news conversations needs one additional element: what you want the relationship to look like after this conversation. because that shapes everything about how you deliver the news. My objective isn't just to deliver this news, it's to deliver it in a way that preserves trust, makes the person feel treated with respect, and leaves them knowing what happens next. Even if they're disappointed or upset, I want them to leave knowing I handled this with care. That objective, added to the brief, changes the output significantly. The preparation doesn't just cover what to say, it covers how to say it in a way that serves both the message and the relationship. The timing, the framing, the language that names the difficulty without softening the truth, the clear next steps that give the person something to hold on to. Difficult conversation type 3, pushing back on a decision you disagree with. This one is difficult for a different reason. The power dynamic often runs against you. Pushing back on your manager, your client, or your leadership team requires a specific kind of confidence, and most people either overhedge to the point of being unclear or overassert to the point of damaging the relationship. The brief for a pushback conversation needs to be honest about the political context. This person has already made a decision. I'm not trying to reverse it. I'm trying to register a concern in a way that lands seriously, doesn't put them on the defensive, and leaves the door open to reconsidering without them feeling like they're backing down. That framing, and Claude AI can work with that framing explicitly, produces a preparation that understands the politics as well as the message. It gives you language that positions your concern as adding value rather than challenging authority. It helps you find the moment in the conversation where you can land the point most effectively, rather than opening with the disagreement. Difficult conversation type 4, a conversation with someone you have ongoing tension with. These are the hardest to prepare for because they carry history. Every word lands in the context of everything that's happened before. A phrase that would be neutral with someone else carries weight with this person, and you know they're going to interpret things through a particular lens, which shapes how you'd normally approach it. The brief for this type of conversation needs to include the history, not as background color, as a key input that shapes the preparation. I have ongoing tension with this person. The history is, describe briefly what happened, where things stand, what the dynamic is. This shapes the conversation because explain how the history will likely affect their reaction to what you're about to raise. I'm not looking to resolve all of that history. I'm looking to have this specific conversation in a way that doesn't reactivate those tensions unnecessarily. That context changes what Claude AI produces. The preparation isn't generic, difficult conversation advice. It's calibrated to the specific dynamics of this relationship, this history, this moment. Part 2. The elements that make the preparation actually work. The single element that makes difficult conversation preparation useful rather than generic is naming the tricky part. Most people prepare for the conversation they hope to have, the one where the other person receives the message well, responds constructively, and they leave with a clear agreement. Claude AI can prepare you for that conversation in 30 seconds. That preparation isn't worth much. What's worth something is preparation for the conversation you're afraid to have, the one where they get defensive, where they cry, where they say something that catches you off guard, where they challenge a premise you weren't expecting to defend, where the silence after you've said the main thing goes on too long. When you name those moments in the brief, specifically, honestly, without softening, the preparation covers them. You walk into the conversation with a response ready for the moment you were most worried about, and that readiness changes how you carry yourself in the room. Not because you've scripted every word, but because you've already been through the hard part in your head. The second element worth specific attention is the opening. Most difficult conversations go wrong in the first 2 minutes, not because the message is wrong, because the opening triggers defensiveness before the message has been heard. The person senses something difficult is coming. They go into a protective posture, and everything you say after that lands against resistance rather than openness. A good opening does 3 things. It signals that this is a conversation, not a verdict, that you're here to work through something together, not to deliver a judgment. It names what the conversation is about without triggering the full defensive response before the other person is ready. And it gives the person a moment to orient, a breath before the difficult thing is said. Claude AI, given the brief with the relationship context and the message, can draft that opening, not as a script, as a structure and a tone you can make your own before you walk in. The third element is the close, and most difficult conversations are left without one. The conversation reaches a natural pause. The main thing has been said. Both people are ready for it to be over. And it ends, not on a clear agreement, not on a next step, not on anything concrete. It just trails off. Which means a week later, nothing has changed, and the conversation has to happen again. A good close does one thing. It names what happens next, specifically. So what we've agreed is X. The next step is Y, and we'll review on Z. Not elaborate, specific. The conversation ends when both people know what follows from it. The brief asks Claude AI to prepare a close, which means you walk in knowing not just what you're going to say, but how you're going to end on something concrete. That's what makes a difficult conversation productive, rather than just painful. Here's how to make this systematic rather than something you only do when the stakes are high enough. In your co-work project for team management or client relationships, add a section called Difficult Conversation Protocol. When preparing for a difficult conversation in this context, always address the opening, the core message, the tricky part, and the close. For this team, this relationship, the dynamics to be aware of are: describe what you know about how these people typically respond to challenge, criticism, or difficult news. Always prepare a fallback for the moment where the conversation might stall or go sideways. With that section in your project, every difficult conversation brief in that project starts with those parameters already loaded. You write a shorter brief, you get a richer preparation, and the preparation is calibrated to the specific relationship dynamics you're actually operating in. Here's what changes beyond the conversation itself. The professionals who are most effective in difficult conversations aren't the ones who feel most comfortable with conflict. They're the ones who are most prepared. Preparation produces confidence, not because you've scripted every word, but because you've already been through the hard version of the conversation in your head, and you know you can handle it. That confidence is visible. The other person can feel it, and it changes the dynamic of the conversation from the first moment, because they're not dealing with someone who's hoping the conversation goes well. They're dealing with someone who's ready for wherever it goes. Claude AI doesn't make difficult conversations easy, it makes you prepared for them. And prepared is the only version of this that actually works. Quick reference: the preparation framework. The brief template: situation, the person, your objective, the message, the tricky part, and what you need help with. Opening, core points, handling the tricky part, closing on a clear outcome. The element that matters most, the tricky part. Name the moment you're most worried about. The preparation is only as good as your honesty about where the conversation might go wrong. 4 types: performance issue, delivering bad news, pushing back, ongoing tension. Each needs slightly different framing, but the same brief structure. The close. Name what happens next, specifically. The conversation isn't done until both people know what follows from it. 2 things in the description. The brief, 1 page, free. The difficult conversation brief template alongside 4 other professional task types. Print it and keep it accessible. Your first week with Claude AI at work, $30. Day 3 covers meeting and conversation preparation in full. 5 worked examples, including 2 difficult conversation types. Both links in the description, via Claude for Lawyers on Gumroad. Same creator. That's episode 16. Name the tricky part, prepare for the hard version, walk in ready for wherever it goes. Serious skills, actual output, every time. See you in the next one.